Hey, everybody, welcome back to Dad Talk. Today, we are proudly sponsored by Upstream Growth Consultants, the Clock Law Firm, the Isaac Law Firm, the Father's Rights Movement, and the house champ, Mr. Yahya McLean. But tonight, we've got a very special episode. We are welcoming back one of our very favorite guests. I'm with Chris Gannon, as always, but today we are joined by Mr. Paul Elam himself. Paul, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing all right. Looks like quarantine's treating you pretty good over there, man. I'm a little jealous of that beard.
Well, I tell you, I don't have to worry about shaving every day these days.
I hear that.
Now, Paul, what have you been doing? It looks like you've done some paintings in the background there. You've got one hanging on the wall. Did you do those in quarantine?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, if you believe that, I'll sell them to you. No, just a little art by Gerald Scarfe, the artist that does a lot of the Pink Floyd stuff. He's one of my favorite artists, and I have a lot of his stuff hanging in different places.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I'm not too sure how much we talked about it last time you was on, Paul, but tell us a little bit about A Voice for Men. How did you find yourself creating this website that talks to men about their issues?
Well, I was working for years and years as a counselor in the chemical dependency field. And of course, in that population, people with alcohol and drug problems, violence, family violence was also a pretty common issue that we had to deal with. I noticed some disparities in the way that we treated both men and women in that regard in investigating and dealing with family violence. And I began asking questions. And then one day, a friend of mine, a female friend, a therapist, hands me a book by Dr. Warren Farrell called The Myth of Male Power and says, I think you need to read this. And I did, like in 48 hours, cover to cover, and it changed my life. It absolutely did. It made me rethink everything I thought about men and about women, and especially about power and who had power. That was the biggest world shaker for me. And I began asking questions about this in the place that I worked. I got a lot of resistance, a lot of hostility, and I decided that some way or another, I was going to fight back. I began writing letters to editors of newspapers for several years. The internet was not quite on the map in those days as it is now. But I knew even then at some point that the internet would become a platform that would be effective if it became used by a lot of people. I couldn't in my wildest dreams have imagined what the internet would turn into, but sure enough, it did. And then I thought, well, this is better than rejection letters from editors and from newspaper publishers and people refusing to print my stuff. So I started printing my own online, and sure enough, it gathered attention. I became editor-in-chief for a website called Men's News Daily that was really something back in its day, a huge amount of traffic to that site. But they had never had anybody that was truly an MRA, a men's rights advocate, working there. And so I changed the tune of the publication a little bit. And after a year of that, I decided that it was time for me to branch out and have my own voice, which I ultimately called A Voice for Men. And that started in 2009. And here we are.
That is so awesome, man. And, I'd like to give props to people like you and especially Dr. Warren Farrell. I know in his time it's still not easy to talk anything about men, but I was watching some of them older episodes like with him on Oprah and the hate that he got speaking out for men. And I'll be honest, since the last time I talked to you, Paul, not much has changed. Anytime I talk about fathers, we seem to get a lot of hate off of that. And it's like, it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to speak about our issues. And it's okay if we speak about them as long as we put mom to in that sentence. And it's to an extent that the PC message of that and having to do this just to please people so that I can talk about the rights for fathers, and be honest with you, it kind of disgusts me at times.
It's frustrating, isn't it?
It's very frustrating.
Right.
Well,
when you look at the way the system's set up, it's almost been created to be like that so that we don't have a voice, and especially in the family law courts where we can't stand up for ourselves because right now, well, even for the past 2 years, there was the Me Too movement, and now anytime a man pipes up a little bit, it's like, hey, shut up, you've got all the rights already.
Well, just for a little historical perspective on this, and I do have some thoughts on that I'd really like to share with you and your audience. You go back to E. Belfort Bax, who wrote about these issues in the late 1800s. He published a book called The Fraud of Feminism, another one on the subjugation of men. He talked explicitly about the very same issues that we're talking about today. You could, when you read his works, you can tell it's from a different time, but you wouldn't know it by the issues, and you wouldn't know it by the reaction that people gave to his writing. And he chronicled that in some of his writing, the bitter hostility of people reacting to his writing. And this was before the advent of gender feminism in the 1960s by nearly 100 years. That hostility that you guys have experienced just by talking about fathers' issues has always been there, and it's going to be there for a long, long time. The fundamental problem is that in order to talk about men's issues, you have to confront gynocentrism. And you can do that gently, and they're going to hate you. You can do it moderately, and they're going to hate you. Or you can do it really loud and abrasive like I do sometimes, and they'll hate you just as much. It won't make any difference. I've had people for years, many times people saying, come on, Paul, why don't you be more like Warren? If you were just more like Warren, things would be better. Well, no, they really attacked Warren and tried to destroy his reputation, and went after him with a viciousness that was absolutely stunning, every bit as much as they have me. We have to get used to the fact that in order to talk about men's issues, we're going to run up against gynocentric attitudes, not just in feminists, but in people who aren't feminists across the board. The idea is that if you talk about men's issues, it's like it's a zero-sum game, that it's taking from women if you do that. And a lot of people actually believe that. But that's the hand we're dealt in trying to talk about these issues. We're going to get hatred. We're going to get rocks and tomatoes thrown at us. And we're either going to fight back, or we're going to get pelted and we'll go back into obscurity.
Paul, I have a question. What are some of the vicious things that have been written or done to you? Just because I'd like our audience to know, like, you're not just somebody who's sitting there talking about men's rights and you have this happy-go-lucky life. There's consequences for speaking up about what's right. What are some of the things that have been done to you by the opposition?
Well, I'll start with back in 2014 when we had our first international conference on men's issues, and the Hilton Doubletree Hotel in downtown Detroit, where we were scheduled to have our conference, was barraged with threatening phone calls from people saying they would kill me, kill all the speakers, kill hotel employees, kill guests at the hotel with nothing to do with it whatsoever. It got so bad that the hotel literally made it impossible for us to continue there. I've been attacked in mainstream publications like BuzzFeed, the New York Times, Daily Beast. I mean, there's a long, long list of mischaracterization of my work as being about promoting misogyny and violence against women, which is categorically untrue. I know that as far as advocates for men go, that I've been more vocal than a lot. I've certainly been more confrontational than a lot, but I've never advocated hating anybody. And of course, what they've written has been outright lies. I've received death threats by email on numerous occasions. Is that a good start to answer your question?
That's perfect. I was just chuckling because we had a comment. Bill Whitfield in the comments said, "Hi, y'all. Welcome to the stoning."
Hi, Bill.
Yeah. It's what it is. I mean, and it doesn't matter how much you preface it and try to bring that message as soft as possible. So I have to agree with you. You can either do it silent or you can do it loud. And a lot of times we got to get loud. Some of the things that we're going through, and I'm curious. I've been talking to Chris about it, and I'm not going to lie. A lot of this stuff I'm still new, and I'm learning. I'm learning from guys like you. I'm learning from Farrell. But one of the things that's really boggled my mind here lately, Paul, are you familiar with the power and control wheel and the Duluth model?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Could you talk to our audience a little bit about that? For anybody that doesn't think there's a bias, could you tell them a little bit about what the Duluth model and the power and control wheel is?
Yes, the Duluth model is a product from a bunch of crazy feminists up in Duluth, Minnesota, that decided that all domestic violence, and I mean this literally, not part of it, not half of it, all of it, every act of domestic violence that has ever happened is one, a man beating on a woman, and two, it's a remnant of patriarchy. It's the expression of the power, patriarchal power into the home by men. Their contention is that defines what domestic violence really is. And of course, if that's true, if that's their really model, which they're asserting it is, any act of violence by a woman in the home totally obliterates their model. You can't possibly have a violent woman abusing anyone else in a home under the Duluth model. So they have to deny women's violence. And when they deny women's violence, they also consequently deny violence acted on children by women. So in all the domestic violence industry where we have these women-only houses, all of them operating under the Duluth model, they, by the nature of their model, they must deny women's violence. That means these kids that are being abused are totally ignored. They have nowhere to go. And I spent years, one of the things that happened after I read The Myth of Male Power was that I started asking my male clients if they had been victims of abuse. And one of the first guys that I asked had been bashed over the head with a fireplace poker while he was asleep. He got 12 stitches in his head. I called around to the Women's Information and Referral Exchange in Houston and a couple of other places, and I was literally laughed off the phone when I said I had a guy who was a victim and that he needed some kind of support after he was released from treatment. And it was a joke. And one place even offered and said, well, we can send him to anger management control for batterers. And they were serious. These are people that have no concept whatsoever of women committing violence, even though we know from the research now that roughly half of all domestic violence is committed by women, and 70% of non-reciprocal or one-way violence is committed by women. Yet all the funding, of course, one of the things Cassie J pointed out in her movie, 2,000 shelters in the United States, one for men. And I think there may be two at this point, but it's absolutely disgusting. And a lot of that goes back to the Duluth power wheel. And it's one more interesting thing about the Duluth wheel. If you start looking at the behaviors they describe, the controlling behaviors, the cutting off of finances, the isolating the victim from their friends, a lot of this is what happens to men in abusive relationships. It's exactly what happens. They get a personality disordered wife or an abusive wife that doesn't want them to have their own friends, doesn't want them to have their own hobbies or their own time to themselves. They feel threatened by it. So they begin to systematically isolate the man from all those things. Classically abusive stuff, according to the Duluth power wheel, only it's women that are doing it.
You know, and I think it's important for people to know, there might be some people that are watching this right now, like, what does that got to do with family law courses? That's mainly what we talk about. This Duluth model, power and control wheel, is taught in all 50 states to everybody that operates inside of the family law courts. I was talking to a psychologist out of Australia the other day. It's taught in Australia. This is the model that represents us men inside a family court. And when we're going through these issues, and a lot of times I know I get it, the BPC, they say, oh, we got to forget the gender wars. There's no gender bias, but there is a gender bias. And one part of that power and control wheel that really just put a fire under my tail. What is male privilege, Paul?
I think I'm still trying to figure that one out. I wish I
Male
had.
privilege.
And again, it defies reason how anybody could ever look at a man in a family court, look at a father in a family court, simply just trying to have access to his children, or trying to get his child support adjusted to a level that he can still afford a box of macaroni and cheese by the time he's done paying. Where's the power? Where's the privilege in that? It is absolutely stunning that these people who are operating, they are called friends of the court. They're operating in these courts in 32 states. You must subscribe to the Duluth model in order to get a position in a court as guardian ad litem or any of these other roles that evaluate what's going on with children and families who are in disrepair. So, privilege, no. Punishment, yes. Bias, yes. And it is so blatant. And again, I take this back, and I really think people have to understand the fundamental problem of gynocentrism. It is gynocentrism that allows this hypocrisy to be practiced right in broad daylight, right in the open. Everybody sees what's going on in courts. They know the men are just shuttled through like cattle, and that restraining orders and other matters are rubber stamped by the court without question, that men are constantly in courts trying to defend themselves from false allegations and failing, having those allegations without corroboration go on. All of this goes back to the idea that we rescue women no matter what. Whenever there's a conflict, we must rescue women. And until we as a society come to terms with that, we will never, ever fix what's going on in these courts.
There's no equality in that. There's no equality in that whatsoever. And I do believe what I was saying. Again, I'm still studying up on it. A lot of people talk about Title 4D, but this Duluth model really needs to be the topic that we're discussing right now. It says that 90% of domestic violence is by men. We know that's not true. Harvard did a study that said 70% was initiated by women. And a couple of days later, Paul, it was deleted. Now, why would a report like that be deleted?
Oh, because of male privilege, of course.
I love it.
Well, and with that being taught in the schools, the Duluth model, a lot of these schools are receiving federal funding. And just like we saw in the news recently with Trump stating if there were any Second Amendment issues on a campus, he was going to yank that federal funding from that institution. We should be making some noise about the fact that this is being taught in higher education institutions across the United States, because chances are every attorney for the past 2 generations that has gone to college and gone to graduate school has been taught this. Now, not all subscribe to it, but really, if we wanted to take an angle and go after something or somebody, would you say the higher education institutions would be a place to start? Because they're pretty much teaching the lawyers and the judges, like, look, this is how you do this.
Well, I probably should qualify that what I'm about to say, I do not mean literally. But when it comes to higher education, I think the best thing you can do is toss a match on it.
Right.
Right now, at Harvard Law School, the female students protested. These are law students going to get their law degrees, said they were triggered by studying law around sexual assault, and they should not have to take that. That should not, they want their law degrees, but they don't want to go in and study and understand an area of law that has to do with sexual assault. That's how far gone our institutions of higher learning are. They got their way.
Right. What? What? You're kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you at all. This is how bad, or not only, it's not just the Duluth model, patriarchy theory, which is a bucket of hogwash. It's the idea that civilization advanced for men, that men have had all this power and they exercised it at the expense of women. Instead of the cooperative relationship that we used to have between the sexes, that we know existed for a long time. They've replaced it with this theory that men have always historically held women as slaves and benefited from women at their expense for the sake of male privilege, which is absolutely insane. My grandmothers would have said that was insane. And one of my grandmothers was born in the 1800s. She would have told, if you would have told her she was powerless and that she was oppressed, she would have laughed in your face or maybe slapped you. This is not, I mean, how do we change?
Lost you there for a second, Paul.
Yeah, it looks like he's frozen.
Fix this. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're lagging a little bit.
You were lagging there for a second.
Oh, I apologize.
Oh, you're fine.
Anyway, I was just saying, with colleges and all the institutions of higher education so dominated by ideological leftists and feminists, how do you overcome that? I don't know. I don't have a clue. You would literally have to take all their funding and start from scratch.
And when we talk about like ways to overcome and strategy, your strategy, you're not very thin-skinned. You're very outspoken about the issues. And we had a comment by Mike Simmons: the world is driven by division. When you say I can't say it, gynocentric, you bring the hate your way. I'm not saying I disagree with you, but you must admit gynocentric, that's what I was trying to say, is very divisive. Why, like, for some of our viewers that might be listening to you for the first time, like, why have you chosen to be like right out there in everyone's face opposed to like, please listen to us?
Well, yeah, I can say that. Okay, I got the comment up there. World is driven by division. When you say gynocentric, you bring the hate your way. I'm not saying I disagree with you, but you must admit gynocentric is very divisive. Well, we live in an age where the truth is divisive. Gynocentrism is a word that's been around for 150 years. It is a thing. And we have a choice here. We can say, I won't say this word because it upsets people, which means I can't really talk about what the problems are that we have to solve. Or I can say it and risk upsetting people and creating division. I don't buy it. I don't buy that line of thinking. I think that kind of thinking actually keeps ideas in cages. It keeps progress locked up. And it's very, very important. All we have to do, when the words women's lib came out, they were considered a joke. People laughed at it. And it was divisive, too. The early days of feminism, at least the 1960s, was a hugely divisive time. Guess what? People got over it and they got used to the fact that women wanted different choices with their lives. That time has come, or should come, for men. And while I certainly respect the gentleman who brought that up, I couldn't more passionately disagree with that mentality that we should shut up because it'll bother people. We need to keep talking about these things until people get used to it.
You know, Paul, and I'd like to make a point. A lot of times on the podcast, I've begged these men to speak out. I think that they're silenced many times and they're afraid to speak, and they let other people shut them up. And that's the problem. And it's somewhere I saw you talking about not too long ago. Is like, we've got all these weak men that they want to cry about their problems, and they need to be, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but they need to be tough. Are you going to sit here and whine about it, or are you going to do something about it? And I was like, dang it. I hate to say it. This man's dead on, because that's what I see a lot is they just sit here and talk about the problems over and over and over and never do anything about it. Mm-hmm. We need you to speak up. We need you to be men. We need you to come over here and help us. Without your help, we're going to keep going through this. What would you say about that, my man?
I think you're absolutely right. And it's unfortunate. And the thing is, I don't have any inclination, and I know I've shared this with you guys before, I'm not inclined to shame men for anything. I think men have been shamed enough, and it's time to stop the shaming. But the fact of the matter is that most men will remain silent because they fear the rejection of women. And that is slavery. We won't speak up about these issues because we're afraid women will reject us. And guess what? Many of them will. Because women are not accustomed to being confronted about the power they have in this culture. Guess what? The answer's still the same. Eric, what you said was absolutely true. The only solution to this is going to be men speaking up. And right now, we have more powerful female voices for men's issues in many ways.
We do, 100%.
Because not enough men will speak up. So women are having to speak for them. And I'm sorry, guys, I don't mean to be shaming or anything like that. But the reason I respect these two guys here and other people that do this work is that if you're concerned about your treatment in family court, but your best effort is to let women speak for you, then man, it makes me sometimes second guess, why am I advocating for people like this? But I am. I'm going to continue to do it. But it frustrates me too.
Would it be fair to say the same ones you said that are afraid to speak out because they don't want to be rejected by the woman, those same people, they'll talk very openly about somebody like me or you for the same purpose? They're trying to gain some, credit over here with the same women.
The white knight syndrome is that this is what, again, I'm going to say that terrible word, gynocentrism again. That's what drives that behavior. Guys will walk out of a family court with a knife in their back. And the minute a skirt walks by, they'll say, oh man, that Paul Elam, he's terrible.
Right.
That's what we're up against. It is a sad reality. That's what we're facing. And the only thing we can do is what we're doing. But I'm encouraged. I've been doing this actively for 11 years now, nonstop. And I see more men openly talking about this stuff now than I ever have. When I started, there was Warren, me, a couple other people, and we were mostly in very quiet corners of the internet, not drawing any attention. Now, if you go through and you read misandric articles on the internet, and there's plenty of man hatred out there to go around, look in the comments, and you do see men speaking up. Unfortunately, a lot of them are behind screen names, which I get. You guys are coming out here with your real names, and you're taking on, the men out there who want things to change. They owe you guys a debt of gratitude. So I'll say that out loud. I hope you guys are contributing to this program. I hope that guys get behind you and support you financially as well as morally and spiritually, because this is very unrewarding, difficult work. You usually don't get a thank you. You usually get rocks thrown at you for doing it. And it takes a special kind of person. I believe it. I'm not blowing my own horn. I'm talking about these two guys here. It takes special people to do this. And man, I just hope it continues to catch on. Hopefully 20, 30 years from now, it'll be after I'm gone. But someday we're planting the seeds that someday this will turn into a movement with real force.
Nah, we can't let it go that long. It's got to happen in the next few years.
Well, it'll be determined by how cowardly the average man is in this culture. That's what's going to decide what happens in the future with men's issues. And right now, I'm a little bit encouraged because I do see more of it going on, but I see an awful lot. Oh, please be quiet. Don't say that word. Don't say this word. Don't talk about this problem or that problem. Don't challenge women to look at their privilege in this world, which they have. Yeah, that's what we need to do.
Very good. Like, you just nailed it. The reason why I wanted to read that question on here is, okay, when we get to the point where we're afraid to use a term or a word, okay, that's not us projecting or being combative onto somebody. That's us using a word that they don't like. And they have the option to walk away and be like, you know what? I don't like that word, and go about their day. Or they can say, you know what? We're going to attack you. All right. And when you think about it, it's actually achieving exactly what we're talking about right now. You should be able to say that word. You should be able to speak that word.
Allowing them to shut you up.
Right. And as far as the division factor goes, okay, I think a lot of people, we've said the words divide and conquer a lot of times on this podcast, but behaviors, okay, they may not be words, but the behaviors that are being thrusted towards us in general, okay, they're actually more harmful than the words we're using to describe the behaviors. And then they turn it around and put it on us and say, don't use that word.
Yes. Yeah, I know. It's insane. And it is so destructive to the idea of any kind of progress. But I love what I'm hearing you guys say, because in the end, pardon my French, but screw them. I'm going to speak my truth, period. If anybody doesn't like it, man, line up. If you want to criticize me, there's a queue about 1.5 miles long. So you stand in line to do that. But we're going to have honest conversations. Really the funny thing is that anybody who studies my work knows that I'm very, very hard on men too. I challenge men, hold their feet to the fire very strictly, and nobody has a problem with that. Oh yeah, you tell them. That's great.
I've seen it.
Hold women's feet to the fire. They're like, oh no, don't. They'll get mad.
Well, the image that's been painted is that if you speak out for fathers, if you speak out for men, that means that you're against women. And that couldn't be further from the truth. When I speak out for a father, or when I speak out for my brother over here, it's because they're going through an issue. And if I don't speak out about it, they're going to continue to go through it. But they paint us with that stereotype because that shuts you up. And a lot of these people out there, they allow it to happen. And I'm not going to take it, man. I'm not afraid to be dad. I'm proud to be a father. I'm proud to be a man. And I do think that we have gotten, the reason I'm sitting here as an alienated father and I haven't been in my child's life for 2 years is because I'm a man. Make no mistake. That's why I'm sitting here, and I'm going to speak out about it.
And think about the irony of that. Even in your own audience, people are aware of the fact that the reason that you're an alienated parent is because of bias against men and for women. But if you give that bias a name, then you're being divisive.
It almost makes me think, at what point do the changes occur that make men realize this? So is it like, okay, well, men, you can only drive your car during daylight. What more needs to happen? Because a lot of men, well, all the men in our community, part of the reason why they're here, their kids have been taken from them, their livelihood. And if they're not willing to stand up and speak out after that, it's like, well, where's the goalpost here? When's that going to happen?
It's going to be a long time. You have to have the thing that has to happen. We carried the tagline at a Voice for Men for about 7 years called Changing the Cultural Narrative. You have to normalize this conversation that the three of us are having right now. That has to be normalized to the point that we're not sitting here talking about the resistance to these ideas, but we're actually talking about solutions to the problems. That it's been normalized so much that people don't react by calling you haters or misogynists. When that happens, when the narrative of the culture has been changed adequately to have that conversation that directly without all the hateful reaction, then you're going to start seeing things change. But understand, the women's movement started in earnest in 1848, thereabouts, with Seneca Falls Convention. It was another 70 years before women got the right to vote. After that, it was another 50 years after that before gender feminism raised its ugly head. And that is all happened within the context of a gynocentric culture, with people running to the rescue of women. And it still took all that time for change to happen. This is a slow battle. This is like a big lumbering ship, not a speedboat. And it's going to take time. But guys like you are paving the way for what's going to happen. I don't know if you're going to see results in your lifetime, and you never know. Carnell Smith got the laws changed in Georgia on paternity fraud
That's right.
A
He
one
just
man
popped in
army.
here, by the way.
Yeah. I love that man.
I do too.
Yes, he's a great one. And he showed us how it can be done, that you can make things happen in relatively short periods of time. The overall battle is a bigger one. You know, we're talking about the entirety of Western culture and the way everybody thinks about men and women. But to me, it's worth doing, because even if I don't benefit from this, somebody's children will, somebody's grandchildren will. Down the line, people are going to see that men are human beings, that they deserve compassion, they deserve choice, they deserve equal treatment under the law. And eventually, I do believe it'll happen. But
I do too.
not if we're afraid of uttering words that people don't like.
Well, and that's the end result. We're doing this for the children. We're doing this for change, so we don't pass it on to the next generation. Unfortunately, what you see is you see a lot of other organizations claiming to do the same thing, but they want to carry the PC message. And if you don't do it the same way, they start ganging up against you. You need to stay away from them. Watch what they're doing. And, you know, I'm going to copy the words you said earlier. Screw them. Because we're going to continue to bring the message that we're bringing. And it's, but it happens all the time. And we feel like the redheaded stepchildren. But you know what? Sometimes standing for what you believe means standing alone. And if that's what we've got to do, man, we've got to pave that way. And I'd love to have everybody help us along the way. I'd love to have, you know, I'm proud to have people like you and Warren that I can turn to and have these conversations. We need to be able to have these conversations. The fact that they don't want us to have these conversations should tell you something in the first place.
And nobody has stopped you. You've done what you set out to do, and you're continuing to do it. I mean, I really admire what you guys are doing. I think it's the greatest thing in the world to push past the need for immediate social approval to do what's right. I mean, that is, when you look at greatness throughout history, and I don't think I'm being too dramatic here, when I look at great people, there were people that had a conviction and stood up for it and did things in the face of almost insurmountable odds.
Right.
That's what this battle is. And it's going to take men like that to fight it. Maybe for another couple of generations. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But I think without that attitude, without the screw it attitude, nothing will ever get done about this, because they've been ignoring this stuff for over 100 years.
Paul, I really want to bring up a sticky topic. And this is something that as soon as I say it, a lot of people who are listening right now are going to like draw back and cringe up and automatically tense up. And I don't really want to focus on the issue, but I want to focus on the equality aspect of it. So when we talk about abortion, the big drive on the left side right now is, well, it's my body, my choice. Okay. And I get that. That's a woman's body. But for a man has no choice at that point. Okay. Whether or not you believe in abortion's right or wrong, one, you don't have a right to choose. Okay. Two, after that child comes out, you don't get to choose how you feel like you can support that child. And I really feel like this is an issue that men are afraid to speak out about, especially people like myself and Eric and everybody in this chat that has children. Because if we did, people would be like, oh, well, you wanted to abort your children? Well, no, that's not it. We're talking about equality here. All right. If you're going to give one gender a choice, because let's be honest, it takes two people to create life. Both people should have a say in that. And at the same time, when that child comes out, the other person, the father, should have a say in, listen, this is what I think's adequate to give you for this child to survive. What are your thoughts on that?
That's male privilege, Chris.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, men should be able to control women's bodies while we twirl our mustaches. No. Let me say, for the sake of full disclosure, let me be very honest here. I am, on a human level, I am strongly opposed to abortion. I am not one who would necessarily criminalize abortion. There are some problems in the world you can't handle with criminal law. Our government's been trying to figure that out with the war on drugs for 40 years now, that just making laws against something doesn't solve a problem. And so just for the purpose of full disclosure, I say that I oppose abortion. I would not lock people up for doing it. On the other hand, you want to talk about a controversial topic, LC4M, legal choice for men. It is a term that went around the internet a few years back, and it quickly died out because it was so unpopular to talk about. But I do believe fully that if a woman has the choice to unilaterally terminate a pregnancy for any reason that she wants in the first or second trimesters of pregnancy, if she's got the right to do that and she can't be stopped without any input from the man whatsoever about whether or not he's willing to take care of that child or whether or not he wants a child, then a man should be able to legally terminate his financial obligations regarding that child during the same period. The reason I say that is that abortion largely, now I know there's cases like incest and rape and other things, and those are, I'm not talking about those matters, but largely for women, the decision to abort is a decision about whether or not to be a parent. Period. That's the choice they're making, whether or not they're going to be a parent. And I do not believe that they should hold the reins legally and financially on a man's life when they have choices and force him into being a parent if he's not ready. Right. Women get abortions all the time based on the idea that they're not ready to be a parent, that it's not right for their lives. Yet they have the power to pull men in legally and say, you will take financial responsibility for my choice for the next 18 years. I do think, and I think it's be like forever before it would happen, and possibly never, I believe in legal choice for men. During a period a woman can have an abortion, a man should be able to decide not to be a parent during that same time. That's equal rights. It's ugly. It feels uncomfortable to talk about. There's all kinds of conflict that comes up around that topic. But the fact of the matter is, it is equal treatment under the law. And sometimes equality is a cruel master.
Right. Yes, sir, it is. And you brought up a buddy of mine, Carnell Smith, earlier. And one topic that me and him talk about a lot, and I'd like to get your viewpoint on it, is the fact that every birth should have a paternity test. If you're going to put me on the line for some, and say this is my responsibility, I should at least have the right to know that that's my child. What do you think about that, Paul?
Absolutely. Every birth should have a paternity test. I don't care if the couple's married. I don't care if it's a single mother. I don't care what the deal is. I don't believe in 1 minute that you should be allowed to put a man's name on a birth certificate unless you have a test confirming that he is the biological father of that child. That's absolutely crazy. And to go back to the other topic for just a minute, one of the responses you'll get from feminists who see this discussion to say, if a man wants power, he can just keep his pants zipped. Well, I can tell a woman the same thing. Keep your legs together.
Right.
It's a non-answer to use that kind of BS to say that a man's only choice of birth control is abstinence. Women have more options for birth control in this age than is possibly imaginable. They have every choice in the world. And even if they choose not to use birth control and accidentally get pregnant, they can still choose to abort the child. They have way too many choices, way too much power, and some of that should be shared between men and women.
And that term, he should have kept it in his pants. Whenever I see somebody say that, I don't know why it makes my blood boil. Okay, because I'm like, okay, well, did he rape her? No. Okay, so obviously the two people together made the decision. Why does this get thrown back on the guy? So that's something that when I see it, my blood boils inside, and I don't understand how we let that just come into conversation, and guys will take it and be like, yeah, he should have kept it in his pants, as if they've never had a one-night stand or done anything like that before.
Because they can't be the victim. I think Melissa said it the best. Melissa Isaac, not long ago, she said, you can call a guy a deadbeat, but don't dare call a woman an adulteress.
Oh, yeah.
That,
Don't call a woman anything.
yeah.
You know, if we, one of the exercises I love to put people through and trying to talk to them about how we relate between the sexes and try to help them understand gynocentrism. Imagine the reaction if we had a campaign to go around to all the dumpsters there are in the world and put no babies signs on the dumpsters, or tell women generally, like we love to tell men, that they can prevent rape. Men can end rape. Men can end domestic violence. What about women can end babies being thrown into dumpsters? Women as a class can end false allegations. We don't talk that way to women. And I think there's good reason for that. I don't want to talk that way to anybody. But more to your point about keeping it in your pants, the reason that makes your blood boil is because it's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's just a cheap, easy out, oh, he should have just kept his pants zipped up. Well, she could have kept her clothes on too. What are they proving with that point? They're saying they want men that once a woman, and we know, and Carnell Smith can tell you all kinds of nightmare stories about women salvaging condoms that still have sperm in them and impregnating themselves with them. And they'll still tell the guy he should have kept it zipped. I do recommend to men to treat your sperm like it's platinum, and to guard it carefully, because if you donate or anything like that, eventually it can come back and bite you.
Right.
Yeah, man. And that's, at this point in time, I know, again, we'll be labeled as, women haters. Guys, I've got 4 daughters. I live right here beside my mom, and I love every single one of them with every bit of my heart. And we're not talking about women in general. We're talking about the stereotypes that are out there. And too many people are afraid to do it. And I'm glad that we're finally having a conversation about it. I think I'd like to have you back more, Paul. And we need to continue on with these conversations, because we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg yet.
No, there is, oh God, there's so much. It's incredible. There's so much to be explored here. And the thing is, here's what I've found over the years. And I work alongside women like Karen Strawn and Elizabeth Hobson over at Justice for Men and Boys, and many other fine, incredible, intelligent women. The idea that I hate women is, well, it's just a cheap cop-out. It's a way to dismiss everything somebody says because you don't have an argument against what they're saying. If you can just paint them as a hater, no matter what. I just find it at this point laughable that they can't be any more creative than to come up, oh, you want me to take responsibility for my behavior? You must be a misogynist. No, in normal life, we'd call that being a parent, but I won't get into that conversation either.
You know what, Paul? The next time somebody comes to you and says, Paul, why do you hate women so much? Just be like, you know what? I don't hate women. That's why I have 5 girlfriends. Now, none of them know about each other, but
one of my favorite retorts to that is that if a woman asks me, why do you hate women? I say, I don't hate women, just women like you. Because there's a lot of women that don't see me as a hater. I have lots of female friends, and I bet I have more female friends than the average man in this culture due to the nature of my work and all the incredible women that are out there speaking to these issues right now. So if anybody wants to use my life as an example of woman hatred, they're doing a pretty poor job.
I'll tell you what, we got a woman that's coming on right after this broadcast here in about the next 15 minutes. And when I tell you she speaks for men, buddy, she doesn't hold back. And it's voices like that has really carried the torch for us, because they listen to her. I could come on here and say the same thing, and half the people listen to me. But and she knows that. But that's the thing. And I am proud to have those women speaking for us.
She's aware of gynocentrism.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think she'd have to agree with you on that. I'll ask her about it when we get her on. But
I'm going to see if anybody in your audience ask her not to say that, because it's divisive.
Well, in fairness to Mike, I don't think Mike was like attacking you. I think he
Oh,
was
no,
throwing.
I'm
No.
sorry.
Okay.
I'm having fun with it. I did not take it as an attack, and if I sounded like I did, I certainly apologize.
I didn't take it that way, but I wanted to make it clear for him, just so anybody listening might be like, "Who's that Mike Simmons guy? He's a jerk. He's against us. Go get him."
No, he's actually reflecting the thinking of a lot of people. I mean, this certainly, he brought up a very core part of this discussion with that question, which was really important. And we'll go back to it. You guys have me back. We'll be back on that topic again. We have to be able to talk in this culture about gynocentrism. We've talked about patriarchy for 50 years till we're blue in the face. Now it's time to talk about the idea of gynocentrism and how that powerful force impacts all these issues. If you look at family courts, if you look at men's suicide, if you look at divorce, if you look at any number of parental alienation, all these things that happen to men, you can find that gynocentrism is either at the core of it or aggravates it. Because when men seek solution, they're seen as combatants with women. And, oh, you can't do combat with a woman. Oh, how dare you? Unhand her, sir. This is what the white knight reaction is. And you see that expressed with people holding gavels, wearing black robes. Instead of really focusing on the law and on equality under the law, they're acting like white knights. That's gynocentrism. And it's a very real thing that we must be able to talk about if we're ever going to deal with these problems. It's very frustrating, but I am glad the gentleman brought up the question because he took us right to the core.
Well, we see it all day, every day. We got so many parental alienation groups out there. But as soon as a father speaks, the first thing that comes in there, this is a father's rights group. You know, they hate women. And it's like, I didn't see anywhere in there that said anything against women or that this was father's rights. It was just a father speaking. You're letting the stereotypes speak for you, guys.
Sure. Well, that's how you silence people. You characterize father's rights as, I think one feminist group called it an abuser's lobby. And asserted, people like Michael Kimmel, feminists like that, asserted that the only reason men wanted access to their children was so that they can continue to abuse them. Yep. And they've been peddling this theory about fathers' rights advocates for the past 30 years to the point now that all you have to do is say, oh, he's a father's rights guy. And then every feminist within earshot knows exactly who they think you are. That's how the game has been played. And I think it's really important for men to be able to say, yeah, I'm for father's rights and mother's rights. I'm for parents' rights.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
To not let anybody use that language to shame them into living the lie along with the accusers.
It works. It works. And then the next thing that I've seen that gets PC, I'll get some hate for this, but oh well, they'll say, well, you know what? It's not about you. It's about the children. And that kind of pisses me off because that parent that's over there, that's up against the system, that's having to pay this ridiculous child support, that's being kept away from their child. It is about them. They're a human being too, but we discredit them, a person that already thinks that they do not have a voice, and tell them, well, it's not about you. It's just about your children. It is about them. It's about your children too.
It's about your children for sure. And you happen to be, the parent. I mean, to me, that's a nonsensical accusation or way to distract, to tell people it's about the children. Well, but for the parents should be talking about the children. Oh, well, insane stuff for an insane world.
It's enough to suggest that we protect and we take care of our children, but as soon as somebody becomes an adult, they're disposable. That's what I've always thought of when I've heard that.
Oh, absolutely. And you're perfectly good as a paycheck and as a Wednesday night visitor, but not much else. And that is child abuse. The whole court system, the idea of assigning children like property to people. God, we could have a whole discussion on what family courts should be doing if they weren't busy ripping off fathers and harming children by alienating one of the parents. But I guess we'll have to do that another day.
Let's do that next month. I want to get you back, my man. I think this conversation, I'd like to have you on once a month, Paul, because I enjoy it every time that we do this. And guys, we're human beings. We're adults. We should be able to have these conversations, whether you agree with the person that's on the screen or that's in the comments, and you can do it civilized. And that's how we're going to learn. And until we do that, running in circles. But Paul, thank you so much, my man. If anybody wants to keep up with you, where can they find you?
Well, they can come to paulelam.com, or they can come to avoiceformen.com, or they can come to my YouTube channel, An Ear for Men. And I've got about 300 videos there on these issues that they might find interesting. All softly spoken, gentle, just what you would expect from me.
Sweet. Well, thank you for your time tonight. It means a lot every time we have you on.
Thank you. You guys doing great work. Keep it up.
All right, guys. Y'all stay cool. We will see you next time.